I'll start with sort of the same question I asked Chris. The team now has gone through 4 seasons of a struggle. You've changed players 66 times. You're the third general manager. There's been 4 coaches. It seems as if the problems go a little bit deeper than that. How do you, when it's just changing a coach, as you guys are trying to do, that's kind of easy. But when you have to go that deep in the organization, do you have to just throw everything out and start all over again? Is there a foundation that you can work with?
Well, first of all, I think just changing a coach or changing players, like you perfectly mentioned, doesn't really bring you a definite solution. I think we need to go even a little bit of a step back on even what Chris discussed with you guys just now, on having a much more clear and better evaluated idea what is our identity and what is our protocols. I heard the question about the lack of culture, which I think is a fair question. The league has changed dramatically, obviously, over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. So to go to earlier stages of the Galaxy is something to be proud of, but it's not something to rely upon on how to go forward, and that is the path to go forward. I think within a professional organization, the most successful organizations are very recognizable. And I think that is something in the last few years, and I can speak for last year and this year, obviously, and like I said, being held responsible for that, that is something that has lacked dramatically. I think being very recognizable doesn't go to just having big name players or just playing offensively, or it has to do with an entire club structure, it has to do with an organization, it has to do with more in-depth scouting, it has to do with clearer player profiles, it has to do with how you want to be seen and how you want to be perceived as a first team, which is the biggest piece and the most important and reliable piece to be judged upon. And those discussions are going on right now, and I think it does take a little bit of a step back based on your comment, which is pretty fair and very fair, to be honest. So much overhaul and so much change. The easiest thing is just to keep changing. And you can bring in a new coach, and you can bring in a ton of new players, and you can bring in a new general manager, and you can do whatever you want, and you can overhaul the entire academy again. I don't think that's not the solution. I think we need to take a step back, and we need to take, even with people that really relate to the Galaxy and know what the historic capital is and what we should look like, create a more sustainable and recognizable picture of what our club is about. Because you can win, you can lose, and you can tie games. In the end, you need something to fall back for on when things go a little bit sour. And I feel strongly that in the last years, and the last 2 years that I've been part of this, has been very difficult. If things go a little bit sideways, which I think this year, on every single angle, you can put in arguments why things haven't been good, but you have to have things to fall back on. And I think that is something that we need to create, and we need to be very, very due diligent about. More than only saying, now this is the coach and these are a couple of new players and we'll just see where it ends up.
Thank you.
We'll go with Damien Calhoun next. Damien, go ahead.
Hey, Dennis.
Hello, Damien.
You were one thing Chris brought up was I think he said the roster, sort of trying to get a balanced roster, I believe he said. Where do you think this roster lacks that balance right now, and what areas do you think you would be focusing on as you go into the off season?
Well, I think if you go by this year, which is pretty easy to see, and even last year, there hasn't been any consistency. We haven't given up. We haven't had any defensive balance, and we were far too vulnerable when attacked upon. And I think in transition, it has to do with a lot of things. It's not only the defense. It's a style of play. It's a style of how you want to defend, in which zone you want to defend, and how you position your team based on a system of play. Goes even a step further, how you want to be perceived, like in the other question. I think it needs to be much more consistency and in-depth analysis on how we want to play and what you want to play. It's pretty easy to say, okay, we need a better center back, because that is not the only issue. Because even if we're attacked upon, we're playing through our midfield, and some of our forwards need to be our first defenders. Where do we recover the ball, and when we have the ball, what we do with it? I think it needs to be a more clear idea than just the overhaul of some players and bringing in the man of the moment.
And also, with the success down at G2, I know it's different this year, getting guys to move up with the quarantine rules and everything. But do you expect a lot of those guys to get first team chances next year? Like the kid Augustine Williams, who's like one of the top scorers down there.
Yeah, well, one of the things, to be honest, and is a very positive in this year, and I'm very proud on, is the protocol that we start and the process that we started last year even, with bringing in Juan Carlos Ortega to run our methodology in our developmental area. I think this year, in a very difficult year in their development, because it's not only training to be developed as a player, you need to compete. And some of the players on the first team roster were actually scheduled to compete in second team games. And it's a highly competitive environment in USL for young players. And I think with going forward in that decision, for the moment, that's the right decision. Now, there's been players that have shown great promise. I think with opponents like Las Vegas, San Diego, Sacramento, Reno, Orange County, obviously, I think a lot of players this year, young players, have taken a little bit of a fast track in their development. But you need to be careful also that that going forward we don't throw them up into the first team just because they had a good season in the second team. There need to be good arguments, but I'm completely aware of the great strides forward that we made in the second team, in the academy. I think there's a clear playing style, there's a clear culture, there's clear something that I think going forward will bring a lot to this club. There's young players that we were able to sign to either USL contracts or homegrown contracts, and it's something to be proud of, because some of the talents that we had before, they weren't able to keep them here. And now I think talented players such as Jalen Neal, Marcus Verkrenes, Mauricio Cuevas for sure, Augustine Williams, Johnny Perez, just to name a few, Adam Saldana, are players for the near or immediate future that would have to be considered in a developmental path and going forward hopefully impact in the first team roster. But that's talking a little bit of a longer process, obviously, because they're very young and they're in a initial stage of their professional development.
We'll go with Paul Tenorio next. Paul, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Thanks for doing this, Dennis.
Hi, Paul.
As you go through this search, how much are you looking abroad? How much are you looking domestically? When you look at the history of coaches in this league, traditionally, actually, domestic coaches have been more successful, Tata being the big exception. And obviously Tata came at a high price with a pretty distinguished resume. How do you weight that in your search, and what are you looking for in the next head coach of the Galaxy?
Well, first of all, we received obviously a lot of calls and people that are interested. I think, like I said in the other question, we take a step back and evaluate what is a coach that fits to our current, first of all, needs, and second of all, of a culture that we're trying to create. I think if you go to a first team, there's always been high success with high-profile players. I think that in the last 2 years, we've also shown that Southern California is a place where talent can be scouted, can be nurtured, can be developed. So I think that's part of the process that we're going forward. Not in an extreme way, but I do think it gives a great identity to some of the games to see players that are local, just such as Efrain Alvarez or Julian Araujo or Ethan Zubak on the field. And part of our coaching search is somebody that is willing and is capable and is proven to work with that. On the other hand, this is a great responsibility and a good project. I think that in our evaluation process, we need to be looking at coaches that are hungry, that have eagerness to make something out of this. I know that Los Angeles and the Galaxy is something glamorous, but people that work here need, and players and staff and everybody involved need to work here for the right reasons. This is something that needs to show much more ambitions that we've shown in the last year. Needs to have obviously the qualities of a coach that can lead this process in the right way and can build upon. I do think, with your question about foreign coaches, I think you have to admit that knowledge of the league and a tie into the league is something which is very valuable. You see it in the yearly standings. You see it in the coaches that have success in this league, and obviously something to keep on the table as we go forward.
We'll go with French next. Scott, go ahead.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
On staff, you have a coach who knows this league, who knows this team, who has won in this league. Will you be considering Dominic for this job? If not, why not?
First of all, openly, I would like to thank Dominic for the willingness to take the team in the last stretch in the season. Knowing Dominic as educated and as loyal and as a good human being, it was a challenge for him, obviously being on Guillermo's staff and then taking over. He's very much liked by the players. He has a great resume within the league, and it wouldn't be fair for me to say that he's obviously not taken into account. Obviously, he's taken into account. He's one of the most winningest coaches in the league, but we have to take that in a step, in a calm way, when we can sit down and also hear his part of the story. But first of all, I'm very grateful of him taking the lead in the last few games, that more so the first two were very positive.
Oh, thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
We'll go with Adam Serrano next. Adam, go ahead.
Dennis, a couple questions for you. You talked a lot about club culture and also the winning tradition the Galaxy have had. In 2020, how would you describe that culture as you look to make this job desirable for coaches and players? And then I'll follow up after.
Well, I think desirable to be at the Galaxy is for sure the amount of people that have reached out and want to be here. That is good. Now it's our responsibility how we evaluate that and for which reason they come here. I think in the last year, with the instability we had, at some point, obviously looking at in a more objective way at our roster, I think we completely underperformed. Results show for that. There's not a lot of things to hide behind, and there shouldn't be anything to hide behind. You should be honest and you should take responsibility, which doesn't mean that you're being stuck in the past. You should have to go forward and you have to move on and you have to work hard and you have to be due diligent. Now, I think one of the important things is that we have to look at our club, not as me as a person and bring in a personal project that will save the Galaxy. No, the Galaxy needs to be in a position based on its historic capital, which has always been a winning franchise with great support from the ownership, with people that look forward on seeing the team, with players that draw attention, young kids that look up to the kids that come through the academy and have a role now on the first team roster. And I think build from that. And obviously the people that lead that on the technical side, which first and foremost and with great authority are a head coach and his staff. So we need to be careful and do our due diligence and take some time from now, hopefully until the end of the year, to make the right decision.
As you look towards 2021, obviously we don't know how it's going to look or when it's going to start, but as you start to come up with your roster, are those processes already in place in terms of what you're looking for and who you might be looking for?
Yes, I think it obviously goes a little bit hand in hand with the choice that's being made for a head coach. Obviously, with the authority and a big input on players that are on the roster, the positions that need to be reinforced, looking at the possibilities internally that we have to resolve certain problems. I think those are all the questions and the discussions that we need to have in the upcoming months. The environment and still being under a lot of restrictions with traveling, which are there all for the right reasons, I must say. But that doesn't make it easy. I always like to have a more personal connection to people that I hire, might it be staff, might it be players, and the process and protocols that we went through. For example, for the Mexican Federation to come up with Tata Martino as their head coach, we visited everybody at their house and had a good environment to discuss a lot of things at this moment. And I think everybody on the call goes through the same thing. It's not the same as having a Zoom call and getting an impression than really sitting at somebody's dinner table and go over all kinds of things, even beyond soccer. So it does have an impact, the current state, but as for everybody, it's the same, and we'll have to go with where we're at, and it is what it is. So we'll take the right decision based on the current circumstances also.
We'll now go to Tom Bogert next. Tom, go ahead.
Dennis, thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
I guess if you can lay out specifically what the club's goals are this offseason when it comes to player personnel rather than the coaching search, what are you guys targeting? What do you hope to achieve? And how much flexibility do the club have by way of, roster mechanisms and whatnot?
Well, there's a few, before being very specific, there's a few things that tie into that. Obviously, the coaching search is high priority because the coach needs to be comfortable and needs to sign off on certain player personnel moves. Now, we have a few players that end contract. We have players that we can take their options. We've had some, even in tough times this year, we had some upsides. We have to take some decisions on bringing back players, and it will show up by itself which positions we're looking for. And we'll go through that in our due diligence. Started to reevaluate our scouting processes, be much more thorough on administrative processes and how we bring in players and looking for the future to build a better core of players. Now, this is not easy. We don't know even when the season is going to start. There's a different world out there, international transfer market wise, but we need to take advantage, and we need to be as good as we can in the current circumstances. Now, there is a whole lot of things to think about. Next year, for international duty, there's going to be an enormous amount of events, as from day one in 2021, just to get everything going with qualifiers, World Cup, Euros, Gold Cup, Olympics. So we need to do our due diligence also, that we're not left with a hole in every FIFA day that's come along, or at least have the backup plans as solid and as good, so we can obviously and can compete, and we need to compete. There's no way that after a year like this, and after a decent start in my first year, that next year we won't compete.
We have one last one in English with Gio Garcia. Gio, go ahead.
Hey Dennis, how's it going? Thank you for doing this.
Hey, how are you?
I know you had recently mentioned that Pavone was interested in staying with the LA Galaxy. I'm just curious to know how the conversations are going with Boca Juniors. Have you made an offer for Pavone? Have they declined any offers? And then I just have a quick follow-up.
It'd be a little bit difficult to communicate anything publicly, obviously, on where we stand. But I must say that Christian's intentions are very solid on staying here. I think it speaks for itself that the club is happy with his performance. And I must also say that when the deal was done and he ended up playing the last part of last season and this entire season, transfer market and everything around international transfers has changed dramatically. So from both ways, we'll find hopefully a good solution in the upcoming weeks, and we'll inform you accordingly.
And then, how eager are you interested in bringing a coach before the end of the year? We know that the winter transfer window is in January, and I know you just said you want to make those decisions with the coach. Do Do you think you'll make a coaching decision before the next year starts?
Basically, on taking a coaching decision, I think it's such a high importance decision. I wouldn't put a timeline on it, and I wouldn't put ourselves or as an organization under pressure to, it needs to be before a certain time. We need to take the right decision. If it takes a week longer or 2 weeks longer, obviously there is a lot of decisions being taken towards the roster and players and scheduling and preseason and possible preseason camps, but things like that obviously take a minor importance than the decision on how we're going forward as an organization with somebody that leads the technical side of things, which is the coaching search. And to pin ourselves down to a certain timing or whatever, I think it wouldn't be fair, not for us, but also for any coaches that are out there and might be available.
Thank you.
Ahora cambiaremos a las preguntas en español. Empezamos con Fernando Schwartz. Fernando, adelante.
Gracias, Vicky. Denis, gusto en saludarte. Denis, tú conoces bien a Javier Hernández, fue una apuesta muy importante para el equipo del Galaxy, pero las cosas no se dieron como se esperaba. ¿Por qué crees que pasó esto, además de las lesiones, y qué es lo que esperan de él ahora que él ha manifestado públicamente de que está comprometido con la institución para volver a su mejor nivel?
Hola, Fer, un gusto saludarte. Pues más allá de buscar argumentos para nosotros que no ha funcionado o que no ha sido lo importante, creo que para cualquier jugador nuevo es un reto cambiar de liga, es un reto cambiar hasta de continente. Yo creo que el tema de adaptación no se dio en este año de inicio, fue bruscamente roto por el tema de la pandemia, que ha sido un reto, yo creo que no para nosotros, pero para todos, en conectar mejor en temas personales, en temas profesionales. Creo que ha sido difícil el tener 2 lesiones, lo que me da la esperanza y mucho gusto es su compromiso en las últimas semanas de estar físicamente de la mejor forma. Entiendo que no nos ha salvado ni nos salvó la temporada, pero la intención y el compromiso que ha mostrado en las últimas semanas, también a nivel mostrado futbolísticamente en los últimos partidos, da esperanzas que hacen pensar que va a ser un jugador importante aquí en la liga. El hecho que emocionalmente también está más asentado, que ese es su liga, ese es su club, el club lo respalda, lo buscamos para que funcione y que sea realmente el Javier que conocimos de hace muchos años con toda la ilusión y el talento que tiene. Creo que el haber metido tantos goles en todos los equipos donde ha estado no creo que se le ha perdido en su mudanza. Yo creo que este chip lo tiene y es activarlo y ayudarlo de la mejor forma para que funcione para él y obviamente directamente para el equipo.
Con esto que me dices, Denis, entonces Javier se queda con ustedes para la próxima temporada, porque ya ves que ha habido muchas especulaciones sobre su salida hacia otros lares.
Sí, aquí Javier pues tiene contrato. La verdad, estamos trabajando para preparar de la mejor forma su desempeño el próximo año y creo que con toda la intención de su parte y con la actitud que tiene de triunfar acá, hay que respaldarlo y obviamente ver su mejor versión el próximo año.
Gracias, Denis.
Vamos con John Rojas. John, adelante.
Thank you, Vicky. Gracias, Denis, por el tiempo.
Hola.
Hablaba usted ahora del tema de Cristian Pavón, pero la información que llega de Argentina es que Boca estaba buscando que el contrario, el préstamo que se vencería a 31 de diciembre, como ya Galaxy no necesita utilizar el jugador, se pueda cortar para que el jugador se sume a Boca y esté jugando la siguiente ronda de Copa Libertadores, que sería básicamente el 25 de este mes. ¿Es eso una posibilidad? ¿Es real ese elemento que se está analizando o está fuera de cualquier consideración?
No es un tema que se ha hablado formalmente, ninguna solicitud, ninguna petición, y es más, no es un tema en lo que estamos pensando nosotros. Nosotros estamos pensando en la buena relación que tenemos con el club y al final de cuentas dentro de las condiciones que podemos tener y ojalá tener la continuidad de Cristian acá.
Vamos con Daniel Schwartzman de TUDN. Daniel, adelante.
Gracias, Vicky. Hola, Denis. Suenan muchos nombres para el próximo director técnico, digo, además de Dominic, suena por ahí el Vasco, el Piojo, Osorio. ¿Podrías tú aclarar un poco, esclarecer esos rumores y también sobre el perfil de coach que buscan, si es prioridad que hable los dos idiomas?
Mira, la verdad suenan muchos nombres, no nada más de jugadores. Es un equipo muy atractivo en todos los sentidos. Creo que es un proyecto importante, es una ciudad preciosa con una afición espectacular. El dueño obviamente que ha mostrado en lo largo de los años que ha ayudado mucho y ha respaldado mucho el equipo. Más allá de eso, no sería lo correcto de mi parte de entrar en rumores o hablar de entrenadores, y menos cuando están bajo contrato en otros equipos, más hasta una falta de respeto. Y yo creo que hasta no tener un poco más análisis y tener más tiempo en evaluar nuestra situación, pues no vamos a hacer ninguna lista de candidatos, ni mucho menos. El perfil del técnico lo estamos elaborando, lo estamos analizando en base de los resultados que tuvimos, en base de la historia del club, en la actualidad del club también, con sus jugadores jóvenes, con los jugadores que actualmente tenemos en el plantel, en la actualidad del MLS, con sus restricciones y sus particularidades en cómo trabajan aquí y cómo funcionan aquí los reglamentos. Entonces, en un conjunto, ese es el paso a seguir para tomar la mejor decisión del técnico que va a dirigir este proyecto.
Gracias.
Vamos con Katia Cartagena. Katia, adelante.
Gracias, Vicky. Denis, gusto saludarte. Hablabas del perfil del técnico y le decía Chris que después de lo que fue la época de Bruce Arena fue complicado, quizá han pasado varios años, pero después de haber tenido una cultura muy fuerte y ha faltado un poco eso, es lo que se busca a partir del técnico, un técnico que pueda venir a establecer una cultura de nuevo, que vea esa visión del club. Y la segunda pregunta, bueno, ya lo mencionabas, pero en el tema de Pavón, el jugador dijo que en sus redes sociales que mejores cosas están por venir. Decías, él quiere quedarse, si no se buscaría otro jugador designado. ¿Cómo está un poquito esa situación hasta donde nos puedas informar?
Mira, del anteriores procesos de técnicos no puedo opinar mucho, porque yo, la verdad no tenía ninguna injerencia, no estaba aquí. El único que puedo expresar que el gran respeto que existe no nada más en el club, en lo personal y en la liga, para alguien como Bruce Arena, que ha tenido mucho éxito acá, en crear en base de las expectativas y la necesidad que tiene el club, pues obviamente hay que crear una cultura, una identidad y la filosofía que va a la par con las expectativas que existen en el club, que es competir. Yo creo que este año competimos muy abajo de nuestro nivel por muchas circunstancias, sin quitar ninguna responsabilidad, ninguna injerencia a nadie. Y bueno, esto va obviamente en una decisión en algún momento, esperamos más pronto que tarde, asignar el entrenador que va a liderar este proyecto, pero no nada más es en dirigir el primer equipo. Tiene que tener apertura para todos nuestros procesos, nuestros protocolos, conocimiento de la liga. Pues es un paquete bastante completo. No es fácil dirigir en esta liga, no es fácil adaptarse en esta liga. Es una liga que ha crecido enormemente. No es la misma liga que hace 10 o 12 o 15 años. Los ves en todos los equipos que son sumamente competitivos, y hay que ser muy respetuoso a eso y obviamente elegir bien. En el caso de Cristian, pues él mostró en todo su desempeño y en su compromiso con el club que realmente quiere pertenecer acá. Depende de muchas cosas y depende de un proceso administrativo y una relación que en estas semanas vamos a explorar con Boca, si haya posibilidades. Como bien sabes, el mercado ha cambiado mucho, la pandemia ha afectado a muchos, no nada más a la liga, pero también en los dueños individuales, y obviamente el trato y El convenio en su momento que se firmó se analiza, pero obviamente las circunstancias actualmente con todo lo que hemos vivido en este año y el momento que viven económicamente en algunos clubes, pues es diferente que hace 18 meses.
Se busca negociar el precio, entonces.
Vamos a buscar primero acercarnos y cumplir con el deseo del jugador que se queda acá y vemos las posibilidades y también las intenciones de Boca en este sentido.
Gracias.
Vamos con una última en español con Salvador Pérez. Salvador, adelante.
Gracias, Vicky. Denis, ¿cómo
Hola.
estás? Te Salvador Pérez desde Guadalajara, en México. Espero estés bien.
Qué buena
Oye,
ciudad.
Denis, ya has hablado un poco de la situación de la Galaxy, ya has hablado un poco de los jugadores, ya has hablado un poco del tema de Cristian, ya has hablado un poco del tema de Javier y se ha hablado en muchas ocasiones, pero tú en tu persona, con todo lo que se vivió en este año, lo complicado que fue, lo que se vivió con el cambio de Guillermo, ¿cómo haces la evaluación, cómo haces una autoevaluación de tu gestión y si has podido platicar con Dominic, si has hablado con Dominic, si te ha manifestado algo, si ha pensado él en quizá en mantenerse en caso de que no se consiga el entrenador la próxima temporada de inicio?
Pues gracias por la pregunta. En principio yo creo que una autoevaluación, pues la verdad no creo que ni sería ni el momento ni correcto y trato de mantener en todos los sentidos hace años cierta humildad y un perfil más de trabajador y de tratar a través de una gran intensidad de trabajo conseguir resultados. En muchas ocasiones he dicho que tenemos cosas muy positivas el año pasado, cuando fue mi primer año, y este año, pues la verdad no hay mucho que presumir. Y más allá de eso, pues dejaría una evaluación a la gente que lo corresponde y que lo compete, y no me gustaría abiertamente poner cosas en la mesa de que por qué salió mal o por qué salió bien. Pues es un tema para alguien más en definir. Y la segunda pregunta, ¿qué fue? ¿Perdón?
Te preguntaba del tema de Dominic. Dominic ha mencionado en diferentes ocasiones que ha estado con el interinato, pero si has hablado con él de la posibilidad de que se quede en el caso de que no se consiga el entrenador para la próxima temporada.
No, la verdad, en lo que dije, que muy agradecido con Dominic en tomar la responsabilidad en los últimos días de la temporada para, obviamente, manejar una situación muy complicada, que con su experiencia y con su calidad de ser humano y calidad profesional lo manejó en una forma muy buena. Dominic, igual como todos, se fue unos días a descansar a su casa, empieza trabajos con este fin de semana que hay un evento de visorías y ya habrá momento de platicar más largo y entendido y más al fondo con él de sus deseos, de las posibilidades en el club y qué podría ser para adelante. Pero antes que eso, estamos trabajando mucho más firme en qué es realmente la cultura que queremos, qué es realmente la identidad que buscamos, qué es realmente la filosofía que necesitamos para obviamente no estar aquí en un año y tener un mal año. Tenemos que apurarnos en eso y empieza con eso y luego buscamos las personas que encajan en este proyecto.
Gracias, Denis.
Denis, muchísimas gracias por tu tiempo.
De nada, saludos a todos.